So let's get to the real heart of the issue here today, and that's the if-then-else statement. The if-then-else statement is a little different from Excel in that instead of just executing a single statement, you can execute an entire block of statements when a condition is true. You can use logical and relation operators to make very complex statements if necessary. But in general, here is a simplified syntax. We'll start with an if, then we'll have our test or our condition, followed by the then. Then go to a new line and put as many statements as you want to execute in that block. Notice I indent those statements a little bit so that it shows that they are all grouped together. If I have a second condition, then I will use an else if. Else if is one word. I follow that with a test, then another then another block of statements. I can repeat else if as many times as I want. I'm not just limited to one or two options. I can have many, so else if can be repeated 4 or 5 times if necessary. And then I can have an else. Else kind of gets the leftovers. Whatever doesn't fit in the previous condition statements will be executed if an else statement is there. And once again, you can have many statements underneath else. Notice there's no then after the else. There's no condition after the else. It's just everything else. And then it drops down to the end if statement. Notice there is a space between end and if. So a couple of things about this. The way VBA works is when the condition is true, it executes that corresponding block of statements, be it one or many statements. Then, once it finds a true statement and executes that block, then it jumps clear down to the end of the end if structure. It does not continue to test the other condition statements to see whether they may be true or not. So the order that we have our test can make a difference in how our code performs. If I have 4 different tests and the most common one is a 4th test, it's going to be slower than if somehow I change my code and make that the first test, because it will always have to check those other 3 before it gets to that 4th one. So to see if we can get an idea how this works, let's go through the following example. Let's say you're writing a function that's going to help a salesman or maybe his manager determine discounts that you're going to be giving customers. And this discount is going to be based upon the quantity of items that are purchased. But it's what we would call a tiered type of approach. So once they reach a certain volume, they get a certain discount within that volume range. So I'm going to begin my function with the keyword function. Name of discount, quantity is going to be the variable that I pass in there. So in this first portion of the if statement, the quantity really is between 25 and 50. Then I'm going to set the discount to 0.1. Else, if the quantity is between 50 and 75, I'll get a higher level. Else, if the quantity is greater than 75, I get a higher level still. Now I didn't account for anything less than 25, which is where my discount drops to 0. So I can do that with simply using the else command, and I get a discount of 0. Finally end with my end if statement, and I can do my end function. Now this is not the only way to do this particular function. I'll show you another example in a second, but if I had done it this way, and I'd run that function on sets of data shown in the spreadsheet here, these are the results that I would get. By thinking through my function just a little bit in more depth, I can find maybe a little simpler way to put it. So let's say I start by checking first for the 75. If it's greater than 75, then I'll give the full 0.25 discount. Now then I can do an else if the quantity is greater than 50. If the quantity was, say, 76, I know that it would execute the first if statement and then jump to the end. So I never have to worry about it executing the quantity greater than 50 if it's also greater than 75. So it's really not necessary for me to test that it's also less than 75. So this can make my program a little bit simpler from a logic point of view and simpler to code. By the same token, I can test if it's greater than 25. I know that it's less than 50 for 0.1. And I know then with an else statement that it's got to be less than 25. So my discount would be 0. And I finish my end statement and my function.